12 executives stood up in unison. Chairs scraped back, notebooks snapped shut, and the low murmur of expensive shoes on carpet swallowed the last half of my sentence. If this conveyor brake fails while the line is running, the operator has about 3 seconds before. We're not listening to his fear-mongering, the CEO said, loud enough for the whole room and the camera at the back. He didn't even look at me when he said it. He looked past me toward the board members on the side wall as if asking for a silent vote of confidence. Most of them gave it. A few didn't, but they stood up anyway. One by one, 12 executives pushed away from the long walnut table, adjusted suit jackets, gathered tablets. No, thank you. No, we'll review. No, we'll take this under advisement. Just dismissal. The safety director next to me shifted in his seat like he wanted to say something, then thought better of it. He slid his folder into his bag and followed them out. No eye contact. In under 10 seconds, the largest conference room in the corporate office went from crowded and tense to echoingly empty. The only sound left was the hum of the projector and the faint whir of the HVAC. On the screen behind me, frozen mid-slide, was the image I'd been about to explain, a photo of the North Assembly line. Yellow guardrail scuffed and bent, lockout tags missing on a control panel, and a red box at the bottom that read in plain text, "Likely fatality window, 03 seconds. I stood there for a heartbeat, then 2. Then I did what I always do when nervous energy spikes. I counted my breaths, 1 in, 1 out. By the time I reached 10, the initial shock had settled into something else. Not rage, not even disbelief. Just a very clear, very cold thought. You just made this very simple for me. The room was still empty. They hadn't even bothered to send someone back to collect the video operator. The camera guy shrugged at me from the back of the room, uncertainty on his face. "You can stop recording," I told him. "This part isn't for the intranet." He reached up, clicked the button, and slipped out quietly, leaving me alone. I sat down at the end of the table where the CEO had been a minute earlier. The leather still held the warmth of his body. The name placard still read Mahesh Kulkarni, Chief Executive Officer. I stared at it for maybe 3 seconds. Then I pulled my phone out of my pocket, opened my contacts, and tapped one name. It rang twice. "Inspector Despand," a familiar voice answered. I swallowed once, made sure my voice was steady, and said 7 words I'd thought about for weeks but never actually planned to say out loud. "It's time. I'm ready to cooperate." By 3 p.m., 9 of the 12 executives who'd walked out on me that morning were sitting on the other side of a very different table, with very different people asking the questions. Not about fear-mongering, about falsified safety records, about knowingly bypassed interlocks, about how many near misses you can ignore before the law stops accepting "we didn't know" as an answer. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up and show you how a quiet, rule-obsessed safety engineer ended up in that boardroom, why that slide deck existed at all, and what it actually means to cooperate when the people who sign your paycheck have decided that avoiding bad news matters more than keeping their workers alive. My name is Rishabh Iyer. I'm 42 years old, and up until last winter, my title was Senior Process Safety Engineer at a mid-sized industrial manufacturer you've never heard of, even though you've probably used their products. We made components. That's the word the company liked. In reality, we made the things that make other things move, gear assemblies that go into heavy equipment, brake systems for conveyor lines, hydraulic parts that sit quietly in the dark until suddenly they don't. You know those big distribution centers you see in drone shots, endless racks, pallets, conveyor belts? We were in a lot of those. Our clients were the names you do know, household brands, retailers, logistics giants, food companies. They rarely spoke to me directly. Their procurement teams sent specs. Their lawyers sent contract language about performance and uptime. Very few of them ever came to see the plants where the things they relied on were built. But I saw those plants every day. My job wasn't sexy. It wasn't innovation. It wasn't product. It was simple to describe and uncomfortable to enforce. Make sure the way we build things doesn't kill anyone. People think safety is about PPE posters and toolbox talks. That's the visible tip. The real work is pattern recognition and politics. I didn't start in safety. I started on the shop floor. Right after college, I took a job as a trainee engineer in Plant 3 on the east side. The starting pay was better than an entry-level design role, and frankly, I needed the money more than I needed prestige. My father had just retired from the railways. My mother had never worked outside the home. Student loans plus family obligations meant stable paycheck beat dream job. Plant 3 was loud, hot, and honest. Machines didn't pretend to be anything other than what they were. If you ignored them, they hurt you. Sometimes immediately, sometimes over time. My first week, an older operator named Javed walked me through the line. He didn't talk in terms of specs. He talked in terms of scars. "See this," he said, pointing to a jagged groove in a guard plate. "Before we fixed that, this roller would grab loose sleeves. Took Ammer's glove clean off once. Lucky it was just the glove." He showed me the spot where someone had tripped over an air hose. The corner where a forklift had clipped a rack because sight lines were bad. The control panel that used to be bypassed with a bit of wire to keep things running until someone got their hand caught and everyone suddenly remembered why the interlock existed. "This place will tell you its rules," he said. "The question is whether you listen before or after the blood." That stuck. I didn't become a safety guy on purpose. I became one because I couldn't unsee patterns once I noticed them. I started keeping a notebook. Every near miss, every weird sound. Every workaround. Operators used to do their jobs faster, not to get anyone in trouble, to understand. Most of the time, accidents don't come from one big stupid decision. They come from 10 small compromises. A guard removed just for today. A warning label that faded. A training that got shortened because production was behind. You don't see the cost until all 10 stack on the same day, at the same minute, with the wrong person in the wrong place. After 3 years on the floor, the company's corporate safety manager came to visit Plant 3 for an audit. He saw my notebook. Literally, I'd left it on a workbench. "What's this?" he asked. "Just things I've noticed," I said, suddenly self-conscious. He flipped through. "You track near misses on your own?" he asked. "Helps me make sense of what's happening," I replied. He looked at the plant manager. "Why is this guy not in safety?" he asked. 6 months later, I was. Fast forward 9 years. I'd moved from Plant 3 to corporate. My new title came with a salary that finally made city rent feel less terrifying, a badge that opened doors other than the ones that led to noisy shops, a responsibility I took more seriously than any promotion, sign-off authority on process changes that affected worker exposure. Our company had grown. We'd acquired 2 smaller manufacturers. We'd expanded one plant, automated another. We'd also attracted investor attention. Not the patient kind. The kind that looks at charts, circles labor costs, and says words like optimize and lean out. With the new investors came a new CEO, Mahesh. He was on paper impressive, background in mechanical engineering, MBA from a respected school, turnaround experience at another industrial firm. He arrived with a narrative: we're going to modernize. We're going to be faster, leaner, more competitive. We're going to show the old guard what a 21st century manufacturer looks like. Some of what he did was good. He invested in new planning software. He hired a genuinely talented head of maintenance. He pushed for better forecasting so plants weren't jerked around by last-minute rush orders. But he also did what almost every turnaround CEO does. He treated safety as a cost center, not directly. He said all the right words in public. Safety is non-negotiable. Nothing we build is worth a life. Posters went up. Videos were recorded. But when an operator reported that a press brake was behaving unpredictably, the question was, how soon can we get it back up? Not, should we shut the line until we understand why? When a supervisor flagged that a new production target left no time for proper lockout/tagout between runs, the response was, use your judgment. Judgment in that context meant, find a way to make the number. Every safety professional knows this tension. Policies on the wall, pressure on the floor. Most days you manage it. Some days you don't. The year before that boardroom presentation, we had 3 recordable incidents serious enough to trigger internal investigations. None of them made the news. One was a deep cut requiring stitches. One was a crushed finger. One was a fall from a short ladder that resulted in a fractured ankle. Officially, all 3 were attributable to human error. Unofficially, all three had upstream causes: a hurried changeover, a broken light that made a hazard harder to see, a missing tool that led someone to improvise. We fixed the immediate issues. We filed the reports. We updated the training slides. But in my notebook, another pattern was forming. An arc of near misses and minor injuries pointing toward something worse. If you've never seen a line stop because someone got hurt, it's hard to explain the way sound changes. Machines wind down. Conveyors go still. There's this awful hanging moment where everyone's waiting to hear how bad it is. The morning that pushed me over the edge, I was in Plant 2 for a routine walk when I heard the call over the PA. Medical to line 6. Medical to line 6. Line 6 was where the new automated palletizer had gone in. I started walking faster. By the time I rounded the corner, production had already stopped. A circle of people had formed. The paramedic team was kneeling next to a worker on the ground, Anil, a guy I knew by face and coffee preference even if we only talked in snippets. His leg was at an angle that legs aren't supposed to bend. His face was gray. He was awake, though, which almost made it worse. "What happened?" I asked the shift supervisor. "Sensor didn't trip," he said. "He went in to free a jam. The arm swung." "You let someone go inside the cell while it was still powered?" I asked. "It was just a quick," he started. I didn't yell. "Lockout," I said quietly. "We've been through this. No one enters the envelope with power on, ever." He looked ashamed. "He didn't want to stop the line," he said. "We're behind on quota." Behind on quota, that was the phrase. I knew it intellectually. Now I'd seen what it looked like in a human leg. In the weeks that followed, we did the investigation. We documented the missing interlock on one access gate, the bypass safety relay. The informal culture of "we can do it hot if it's small." We wrote corrective actions. We retrained. We updated signage. And I updated my notebook in a different way. Beside the entry, I wrote, "If someone dies here, it won't be an accident. It will be a choice made 100 times in 100 meetings where someone chose speed over rigor." The law doesn't care about posters. It cares about patterns. Most countries have some variant of an occupational safety regulator. In ours, it was a small, overworked agency with not enough inspectors and too many plants to visit. But when serious incidents happen, patterns draw attention. 2 months after Anil's accident, we got a visit. Inspector Despand, thin, quiet, mid-50s, hair more gray than black. He didn't bark orders, he asked questions. "How old is this machine? When was the last formal risk assessment? Can I see your near-miss reports?" He asked to speak to workers without management present. For 3 days he walked the floors. He didn't find any imminent danger violations that required an immediate shutdown. We'd been careful, but he saw enough to be concerned. On the last day, in a small office with faded motivational posters, he sat across from me with a folder open. "You keep meticulous internal notes," he said. He'd already seen my files, the formal ones. The incident investigations with all the proper checkboxes and signatures. He also knew enough about how these companies work to guess there was more. "Do you feel your documented concerns are being adequately addressed?" he asked. That's the kind of question that sounds like small talk. It's not. I thought of Anil. I thought of the press break in Plant 1 we'd been nagging maintenance to replace for 2 years. I thought of the overtime schedules, the production targets. The emails with phrases like, "I appreciate the safety perspective, but we have commitments." "I think we fix what we can see," I said carefully. "But there are structural things that don't move." He didn't press, he closed the folder. "If you ever feel something isn't being taken seriously that should be," he said, "you can call me directly." He slid a card across the desk. I looked at it. Plain, name, mobile number, no lecture. "How would that work?" I asked. "In some cases, we can schedule a formal follow-up," he said. "In others, we can initiate a broader audit. In all cases, we're more effective when the facts are documented." "I document," I said. "I can see that," he replied. I put the card in my wallet, and like most people in my position, told myself I'd probably never use it. We convince ourselves we can fix things from the inside. That's not always wrong. It is sometimes naive. Over the next year, the pressure ramped up internally. We landed a massive new contract with a global logistics company. Big volumes, tight timelines, penalties for late shipments. It was the kind of deal that makes slide decks sparkle. "Incredible growth opportunity," Mahesh said in the town hall. This validates the strength of our offering. On the plant side, it meant more weekend shifts, more overtime, more temporary measures that had a way of becoming permanent. I sat in meetings where production managers said, "We're at the limit. If we push harder, we're going to break something." I watched the CFO ask, "Can we squeeze a little more just for this quarter? We'll reinvest later." I sent emails with subject lines like, "Ray, urgent, guarding on line 4, follow-up required." "Ray, conveyor emergency stops inspection findings." "Ray, north mezzanine rail non-compliance." Sometimes I got support. Sometimes I got silence. Sometimes I got that special type of corporate reply, "Let's put this on the agenda for next month's review." The notebook got thicker. So did a folder on my personal laptop. Not company documents, not confidential designs, just my own analysis, photos I'd taken with my phone from allowed areas showing worn guards, screenshots of system logs where emergency stops had been overridden, minutes from meetings where concerns were raised and deferred. If you're thinking, why keep that at home? Because I'd watched enough organizations go through crises to know what happens when blame starts rolling downhill. People suddenly forget what they agreed to. Emails go missing, servers crash. I wasn't hoarding secrets. I was building a record for myself, in case the day came when someone asked, "Did you know?" And I had to answer yes. I wanted to be able to show what I'd done with that knowledge, not just for them, for me. The invitation to present to the executive team came on a Thursday afternoon. Subject: Process Safety Executive Risk Overview. From the Chief Operating Officer's Assistant. Attendees: CEO, COO, CFO, Head of HR, Head of Legal, Director of Operations, Director of Strategy, plant managers from all 3 sites, a couple of board members. Duration: 60 minutes. I stared at the calendar. I'd been asking for something like this for months. Not because I liked presenting. Because I knew that unless they saw the pattern at their level, they'd keep treating each incident as an isolated inconvenience. I called the COO. "Is this what I think it is?" I asked. He sighed. "Yes and no," he said. "Mahesh wants to show the board we're proactive on safety. You'll have 20 minutes. The rest is for Q&A and strategic alignment." 20 minutes wasn't enough for everything. It was enough for the most important things. I spent that weekend building the deck. No gore. No emotional manipulation, just data and context. Slides like, recordable incidents versus near misses 3-year trend. Guarding inspection results by plant. Time between hazard identification and remediation median V's worst case. Regulatory exposure if current patterns continue. I included quotes from workers anonymized, photos with dates, industry statistics. A very specific slide comparing our incident rate to that of a competitor who had just been fined after a fatality. Not to scare them, to show them where the line was and how close we were. The last 5 slides were case studies, not from us, from publicly documented accidents in similar plants. For each one I included the immediate cause, the underlying systemic issues, the legal outcome, the personal outcome. On the final slide in the corner in small print I wrote, "None of the companies involved thought it would be them." The day of the presentation I arrived early. The boardroom looked like a showroom. Long polished table, large screen, carafe of coffee at each end. The safety director sat near the middle, flipping through his folder. "You good?" he asked. "As good as I'm going to be," I replied. Executives filtered in. Small talk about quarterly numbers, the new logistics contract. Someone joked about golf. Mahesh walked in last. He shook hands around the table, took his seat at the head, nodded at me. "Rishabh, right," he said. "Yes," I replied. "Looking forward to hearing your perspective," he said. "Let's keep it high level. The board doesn't need to see every loose bolt." Polite chuckles. I smiled thinly. "When loose bolts are above walkways, they do," I said. He pretended not to hear. The COO did introductions. "This session is to give us an enterprise view of process safety risks and required investments," he said. "Rishabh has been leading our internal analyses. Rishabh, over to you." I stood, took a breath, and started. The first 5 minutes went smoothly, standard charts, no one fidgeted. When I showed the 3-year trend of near misses, eyebrows went up. "Why the spike last quarter?" the CFO asked. "Increased throughput with no proportional maintenance window expansion," I replied. We pushed the system harder without increasing its resilience. The board members nodded. They understood that kind of math. I moved on. When I showed the slide with guarding compliance rates, one of the plant managers shifted uncomfortably. "We're addressing those," he said. "Some of those inspections were older." I clicked to the next slide. Same photos, updated timestamps. "Taken last week," I said. "Different inspector, same guards." A low murmur. Mahesh's jaw tightened. "Let's not get lost in weeds," he said. "We're here to talk about strategy." "This is strategy," I replied calmly. "Strategy is where you decide whether to accept this level of risk as normal." He didn't like that. I could see it in the way he sat back, eyes narrowing, smile flattening. I continued. At minute 15, I reached the slide with the competitor's fatality case. A worker crushed in a palletizer cell when an interlock failed. "Regulators' findings," I said, pointing to the bullet points. I passed safety circuits, production pressure, known issues not escalated. "That could have been us," the COO murmured. "It still could," I said. That's when Mahesh shifted gears. "Okay," he said louder, projecting CEO voice. "No one is denying safety matters, but let's not catastrophize." Several heads turned. I flipped to the next slide. It wasn't about competitors, it was about us. Title: North Assembly Line Current State versus Required Standard. A photo from our own plant. Bent guardrail, damaged emergency stop. I saw two executives recognize it immediately. They'd walked that line with me a month earlier. "We have multiple issues on this line that meet the formal definition of serious hazard," I said, highlighting the list. "One failure in the wrong sequence and an operator could be in a deadly zone in under 3 seconds. "And how often does that happen?" Mahesh asked. "In reality, once," I answered. "It only has to happen once." He rolled his eyes. "This is what I mean," he said, turning slightly toward the board members. "We've become so afraid of theoreticals that we're losing our ability to be practical." "This isn't theoretical," I said. "This is a risk we've documented 3 times in the last 6 months." He waved a hand. "We are not shutting down an entire line in our most profitable plant because an engineer who loves worst-case scenarios wants to make a point." "Then we'll shut it down after someone dies," I said before I could stop myself. "Under orders from an inspector, not from us." The room went very still. I had crossed an invisible line, not of truth, of deference. Mahesh smiled, not a friendly smile, a predator's smile when prey steps into a clearing. "I think we've heard enough," he said, standing up. He didn't look at the slide, he looked at the heads around the table. "We hired you to advise, not to terrorize," he continued. "We are not listening to his fear-mongering." He stepped away from his chair. "We're done here," he said. The COO hesitated. The CFO looked down. One of the board members opened his mouth as if to speak, then thought better of it. Chairs shifted, people stood. 12 senior people in suits walked out of a room where someone had just told them, "If you don't act, someone will die." Cameras captured it. Our internal comms team loved content. They'd set up a camera in the corner to record leadership engagement with major operational topics. They got something else. And that's how I ended up alone in that room, staring at an empty chair that still held the shape of a decision. And why, when I took out my phone and called Inspector Despend, I didn't feel like a traitor. I felt like I'd run out of internal options. People romanticize whistleblowing. They think it feels heroic. It doesn't. It feels like standing on a cliff edge and stepping forward, not knowing if the water below is deep enough. I didn't call a newspaper. I didn't post on social media. I called the regulator who had already walked our floors, the one who knew that my concerns weren't new. "It's time," I said when he answered. "Time for what?" he replied, voice steady. "Time for you to see the things we can't fix from the inside," I said. "I have documents, photos, meeting notes, including one from 10 minutes ago where the CEO walked out rather than hear about a line that could kill someone." He was quiet for a second. "You understand what you're starting?" he asked. "I understand what I'll be part of if I don't," I said. He didn't praise me. He didn't scold me. He said, "All right, I'll need you to bring everything you have to our office this afternoon, and I need you to send me the internal invite and attendee list for that presentation." By 3 p.m., I was sitting in a government office that smelled of paper and old air conditioning, across from a conference table where Despend and 2 of his colleagues were going through my folder. On their screen was the recording from the morning. Mahesh's voice rang out clearly. We're not listening to his fear-mongering. We're not listening to his fear-mongering. It's hard to argue later that we had no idea when there's video of you rejecting the idea. They paused the video. Deshpande looked up. "Walk us through the North Assembly line," he said. "We spent 2 hours on that one slide, then 3 more on everything else. Near-miss reports, delayed maintenance tickets, emails where I'd highlighted risks and been told noted we'll revisit in Q4. They asked, has there been direct pressure on you to downplay issues? Yes. Do you have evidence? Yes. Have you ever been instructed not to document something? I've been discouraged from using certain language." They took notes. I wasn't their first internal source, I knew that, but I might have been the most organized they'd seen in a while. Years of notebooks and files quietly building a case I hadn't realized I'd need. When we finished, it was late. Deshpande closed his notebook. "We will open a formal investigation," he said. "I need you to understand that once that starts, I can't protect you from internal fallout." "I know," I said. "You will likely be identified as a cooperating witness," he added. "Even if we don't name you, they'll guess." "I know," I repeated. He nodded. "You also need to understand that if we find what I think we'll find, some of the people you work with will face charges," he said. "This won't just be fines." That part was harder. It's one thing to be angry at leadership. It's another to imagine people you've had coffee with needing lawyers. "I'd rather they answer for ignoring risk now," I said slowly, "than attend their speech after a funeral." He didn't argue. Because he'd attended those funerals. The investigation moved faster than I expected. Regulators can be slow when they're understaffed and uninspired. They can also move like a knife when they have clear documentation, video evidence, a major contract in a regulated sector, and a cooperating insider who knows where the skeletons are buried. Within a week, they issued a formal notice of inspection to all 3 plants. They'd requested logs from our digital maintenance system. They'd subpoenaed certain emails. I kept going to work for a while. People sensed something. The COO stopped making eye contact. The plant managers were jumpier on calls. One afternoon, I walked into a meeting room to find a group I didn't recognize, men and women in plain clothes but with that particular posture, reviewing site maps. "Sorry, this room's booked," someone said. "It's okay," I replied. "I know what's happening." He looked up. I saw recognition in his eyes. "Mr. Ayer?" he asked. "Yes," I said. He nodded once respectfully. Within days, the North Assembly line was shut down, not by us, by order. Guards were tagged, controls were red-taped, workers were reassigned temporarily. Mahesh tried to spin it internally. "Routine upgrades," he said in a company-wide email. "We're taking the opportunity to modernize." Plant workers weren't stupid. They saw the inspectors, they saw the clipboards, they heard the questions. "Have you ever been asked to work inside the guarding while the line was live? Have you raised concerns about this before? Do you feel you can say no when you think something is unsafe?" That last question is the heart of everything. The answer too often was, "Not really." By 3 p.m. on the day things truly cracked, 9 of the 12 executives who had walked out of my presentation were in a different conference room, not our shiny boardroom. A neutral site downtown with glass walls and an unflattering view of a parking lot. On one side of the table, regulators, on the other, our leadership plus outside counsel. I wasn't in that room. I didn't want to be. I know what was said because I've seen the minutes since, and because some of the people who were there later called me, but I can imagine the atmosphere. Deshpande opening with, "Thank you for coming. This is a voluntary interview, but I must remind you that providing false statements in a regulatory inquiry is an offense." Our lawyer nodding. Mahesh trying to reclaim control. "We've always taken safety seriously," he'd say. Then they'd play the excerpt. "We're not listening to his fear-mongering." In regulatory work, there's a difference between ignorance and willful negligence. The first can be fixed with training, fines, changes. The second opens doors to charges with words like knowingly. 9 of them had been in that room. 9 had heard warnings. 9 had seen the slides and then chosen to leave. That's why the investigation focused on them. Multiple sources confirmed that during those afternoon sessions, the CFO argued that we trusted the operational team to handle specifics. The HR head tried to frame things as cultural misalignment. The director of operations admitted that he'd felt pressured to deprioritize certain remediation tasks to hit output targets. Pressure leaves fingerprints. Regulators know where to dust. You might expect this story to end with a cinematic takedown, handcuffs, news headlines, CEO perp walk. Real life is slower and grayer. Here's what actually happened over the following months. The regulators issued a report. It was blunt about the state of certain lines, critical of management's documented pattern of minimizing risk reports, specific about missing guards, bypassed interlocks, inadequate training. They imposed fines that hurt but wouldn't bankrupt us, mandatory shutdowns of certain processes until corrected, a requirement for an independent safety consultant to review all major process changes for 3 years. They referred 2 individuals for potential criminal charges related to falsification of inspection records. That part hit hard. The people involved weren't cartoon villains. They were mid-level managers who'd fudged numbers under pressure, assuming it was harmless. It was. Mahesh didn't go to jail. He did, however, resign to pursue other opportunities. The official story was mutual agreement. The unofficial understanding was simple. The board needed a head for the platter. He walked with a severance package that made my entire career's earnings look small. That's a bitter reality. The other executives, some were demoted, some quietly moved on. Some stayed, chastened, sitting up straighter whenever someone from safety entered the room. As for me, you'd think they'd fire me. Retaliation is illegal, but that doesn't stop creative restructurings. Instead, I got an offer. We'd like you to step into a broader role, the COO, now acting CEO, said. He looked 10 years older. We clearly need someone who's willing to tell the truth even when it's uncomfortable. Principal Safety and Risk Officer. New title. Bigger scope. Direct line to the Board Risk Committee. When I told Inspector Deshpande, he smiled faintly. They realized it's cheaper to listen to you than to ignore you, he said. Should I take it? I asked. He shrugged. I can't tell you that, he replied. I can only tell you we'd prefer not to have to open another file on this company in 5 years. If you think you can prevent that from the inside, that has value. Mia, my wife, had a different take. You've already paid a price, she said. If you stay, it should be on your terms, not out of some sense of obligation. In the end, I stayed. For now. Not because they suddenly became noble. Because the workers on the lines didn't choose any of this. If my presence reduces the chances that one of them doesn't come home, that's worth enduring more meetings. But I stay with different eyes now. And a different boundary. If there's a lesson in this for anyone listening who has ever been told, explicitly or implicitly, we're not listening to your warnings, it's this: document, escalate. Know where your duty to your employer ends and your duty to the people affected by their decisions begins. Fear-mongering is what people who don't want to face risk call it when you show them the math. As an engineer, my job isn't to make people feel safe. It's to make systems safe and to tell the truth when they are. There's a cost to doing that. Career friction, cold shoulders, rooms that empty when you say the wrong true thing. But there's a bigger cost to not doing it. I still think about Anil's leg. About how close we came more than once to a fatality. About how it would have felt to sit in a regulator's office without a notebook, without emails, without proof that I'd tried. If you're the person in your company who sees the pattern no one wants to acknowledge, you might be the tedious one, the negative one, the one they don't invite to certain meetings because you bring the mood down. That's okay. You're not there to entertain them. You're there to give them a chance to choose better. If they walk out of the room while you're doing that, you might find yourself someday in a quiet conference room alone with a choice: close the laptop and move on, or take out your phone, dial a number, and say 7 words that change the trajectory. It's time. I'm ready to cooperate. Only you can know when you've reached that point. Just make sure that if you ever do, you've got more than feelings to back you up. Have the notes, have the dates, have the details that match real life. Because when the investigators come, and they will if the pattern keeps going, your credibility won't rest on how passionately you speak. It'll rest on whether your story matches the evidence. 12 executives walked out on mine. 9 of them spent the rest of that year answering questions from people who did not. Thanks for listening. I'll see you in the next one.